Hello and welcome to A Lot of Help with James Lott Jr. I am James Lott Jr. and we're here to help. And this book that we're going to talk about, I decided to put on my book podcast. I thought this would be more of a helpful thing for people, especially folks like myself or of a certain age, thinking about the rest of our lives, like where we're going to live. It seemed like a simple concept kind of book, but it's really important. No one else is writing this. It's crazy. So the book is called Right Place, Right Time, The Ultimate Guide to Choosing a Home for Your Second Half of Life. And it's one of those things where I work with a lot of people in my organizing practice and my life coaching practice who are at change of life. So we're going to talk about all of that. Help me welcome all the way from the weird city that I love so much, Austin, Texas, Ryan Frederick. Hi, Ryan.
Good. Thanks so much for having me, James. I appreciate it. Good to be with you.
I like the plant. I like the plants. I like the plants. Easily placed. Thanks for this morning for coming on. So first of all, the book is good. I love it. I like the book. I went through it and actually kind of did a checklist of myself, like where I'm at. Maybe because now I'm a grandfather of 4 and I'm in my 50s. And I moved back to LA. I lived other places. So I moved back to LA. You're right in many ways of that. It's what we look for now, what we need now is very different than we were in our 20s and 30s. Isn't that correct? Let's just start there. Isn't that correct?
Yeah. I would say I'd say the principles of place matter regardless of age. This idea of being socially connected and so on, but the needs change exactly like you described. And places change too. That's another aspect. So you have to, it's almost 2 variables, you and then also the place around you. But it does change. I know we have teenage kids right now, and which we enjoy. There's some challenges.
I'm sorry. I had 2 daughters. It was crazy.
So we've got a daughter, 2 boys. But part of it, James, is in the research of healthy aging. There's this thing called the U-shaped happiness curve. And we don't hear much about this, but you start up with a certain level of happiness, self-reported, is a global phenomenon. Yeah. Certain point in your 20s, and then you work your way down and you become less happy and less happy. And then in your late 40s, early 50s, which I do think can correspond a bit sometimes with teenagers, then you hit your lowest point. And then you work your way up to the point in your 70s and 80s, their self-reported happiness is greater than it's ever been in their life. So there's a good story about living longer that sometimes our society doesn't advertise as much as it ought to, but place is a really important piece of that in making sure you're in the best possible outcome for these different life chapters.
Yes, there's several things you come up with. We'll break it down, but I agree with you. I know that when I have clients who are in their 70s, 60s, 70s. Well, I have one client, she lives in a 2-story house. She can barely walk as it is on her own. I'm like, why are you? I'm having problems coming down the stairs many times. I'm like, I don't know how you're doing it. And we're talking about that. How she's like, I think I might need to move to have a 1 level. It's that. This book showed me it's that intricate. It's that kind of like for example, where you live, what kind of place, the type of place you live in. Is it an apartment? See, we're gonna get to all that, but that was one example that came to me when I was reading the book. She's had a hard time holding on to the thing. She fell already twice a couple of times. It's like this whole thing. It's like we gotta start looking at things like that as we get older. But no, you're right. Wherever you live. But I say here's my thing, right? See, when you're younger, it's usually about where the bars are, where the nearest restaurants, like you said, social. Also, school district.
Schools are huge.
Yeah. So it's the whole thing. So you're right. It's always an important thing to have. But I think this book, which really talks about after the kids, if you had kids, they're gone. They're already grown up. They got their own families, or you're more financially independent.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're not as financially independent.
Yeah.
Either one. So I'm reading your book made me think of all those things too. And there's a lot of factors, and we are living longer. My stepdad just turned 85. He's still around. He's still kicking. He worked till he was 77.
Yeah.
And that was his choice. He could have kept on going probably if he wanted to. Then he said, I might as well retire. My mother retired, so he retired with her. So he's like, no, retire with her. But he's living longer. People are living longer. And so it's like, where should I live that would be great for me cost effectively, geographically, right? Climate, all that stuff. So one of the things you talk about is actually looking at where you are now. I think this is where it always begins, right? So let's start there.
It's where it always begins. You're right, James. And what I advocate a bit in the book, and you mentioned earlier, is encourage people to do a self-assessment. Like, what are these things that matter? And I tie in, the research around healthy aging and longevity, and I compartmentalize it by purpose, social connection, physical well-being, financial well-being, and then place. Recognize that place has an indirect and direct impact on your health and well-being. And so I think, yeah, it's a good place to start. You might objectively love your single family home, like perhaps your friend you're talking about, but maybe you're socially isolated if you're really honest with yourself, or maybe it's not the best financial decision, or like you mentioned, maybe there's physical risks that you're taking on by virtue of not being in the right place. So I think the first step is an honest assessment. Am I really in the right place? And then sometimes, like friends, family, they can be helpful in that process. How you perceive it may be a little bit different than reality.
Right.
I had one friend that read an earlier version of the book, and he said, Ryan, I just wanted to grab a glass of wine and just like sit back and think, okay, where am I right now, and where do I want to go? And I think that's where that self-assessment can come in.
Yeah, well, it's also, looking at yourself is never easy. I'm a life coach. I'm not telling. I know how to organize, so I know how it is. A lot of help.com. You can go there and check out my website. But no, it's not easy, because you think, be honest with yourself. You just say, no, you're not telling anybody else. It's just you. But that is the hardest. So I invite people to really do that also. Like, really take Ryan's advice. Look at your space. And see, during COVID, a lot of folks had that chance because they were at home and they realized, my home isn't working for me, or there's too much space. There's not enough space. The kids are on top of me. Like, they learned that a lot, didn't they? They learned a lot.
They did. Yeah.
A lot of assessment there, I'm sure. But I agree with you. I think looking at yourself first, that's where you start, because you really want to make the right decision for you. You're advocating for you. I mean, this is you were talking about. And if you aren't around a lot of people and you like that, then you're good. But if you're a person who wants to be around more people, maybe you think, oh, maybe I should move closer to the city, or maybe I should move where there are people, maybe around my age or my style, pacing would be. I would ask you, Ryan, do you believe that cities can change on you? Like, the city can be good for you for a certain time period and then it just ceases?
Absolutely. And it's good and it's bad, James. I mean, I think it's sad sometimes because, you might be in a place where, maybe you're in a city where it used to be a place in the city where it used to be safe, and maybe one thing leads to another, or it's, your area of the city isn't as safe as it once was. And you have to ask yourself, is this, especially as I get older, is this the right place for me? Because I think you can introduce additional risks and just you're a little more vulnerable than maybe you were, if you're in your 20s versus your 60s or something. But yeah, so I think that's a key variable. Like, places change, cities change, regions change. I know you're in California, I'm in Texas. One of the things that has made the headlines for a little bit is the number of people moving from California. And so to places like Texas, but other states too, and just understanding, well, what are the reasons for that? I know in the case of Illinois, for example, they have a really tough fiscal situation right now, where there's concerns about how much money the state's going to have to pay for different services. So if you're in Illinois, you might be concerned over time, what kind of investment will there be in services for older people? Is that the right place? So yeah, absolutely. These places, they change, and you're constantly trying to find that alignment of where you are and where your place is to make sure it's a good fit.
And it's true. At some point, like, I was in San Francisco for many years, 16 years. I left my own, folks. I left because I was ready to go, but I was getting priced out. It was getting to a point where it was getting super expensive. And then when you get older, if you're on a fixed income, I understand that LA now is getting more and more crowded.
Yeah,
lots. We have a new stadium by my house where the Rams and Chargers play.
Yeah.
So my area, Inglewood, is getting very popular. It's starting to happen. They're building a lot of senior living. So I guess, like your book says, you kind of have to pick an area, look around, and see what's being built, what's happening over there. maybe you should be over here because there's like 5 different facilities for senior living that could possibly work for you, as opposed to where you're paying this huge mortgage on a house that's so big for you, you can't take care of it anymore, right?
Yeah, totally. And I lived in San Francisco. My wife and I did for about
Oh,
a dozen years.
yeah.
So I know
You
similar
know,
story. Yeah,
yeah.
similar story. Yeah, the places evolve and so on. One of the things I talk about in the book too is we do need more options, I think, as we get older in general. Then people need to decide, particularly as you do get older, people in their 70s, 80s, is senior living the right thing for me or not? And understanding what those trade-offs are. The title of the book, Right Place, Right Time, it suggests that you don't just make this decision once
Oh,
and it's over. And also it may mean, in some cases, in most cases actually, it may mean that you don't move. But are there ways to make your current place better? It can be as subtle as the neighborhood's changed. I don't know my neighbors. I'm going to make an effort to know my neighbors. It could be other ways to get involved in your community. It could be maybe the decision is to declutter in your house, finding ways to create usability in spaces you didn't before. Maybe it's remodeling in some fashion. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it requires a cross-country move. Our family, I mentioned this in the book, we did go through a cross-country move recently, and we made a decision based in part with our kids, but also for my wife and I, where we would like to be after the kids are gone. And so we moved from the mid-Atlantic, to Austin a couple of years ago. And so but sometimes it does require a big move. But I think that's part of it. At a minimum, requires a lot of thinking as people are living longer and so on.
Yeah, I came from Pittsburgh, and so to my mid-Atlantic, and came to LA. So that was my last move. It was there in Pittsburgh. Steeler Nation! I never know this, Ryan. Folks, I did not know this at all.
This is big.
This is big, Ryan. I did not know that. I did not know this. So see my face like lit. I did not know this.
Oh yeah.
Mid-Atlantic. I'm like, well, I'm kind of from Mid-Atlantic too.
Yeah.
Did you live in Pittsburgh also?
My dad's from Pittsburgh.
Oh, that is crazy.
Yeah. So we visit family there, and we live in Mid-Atlantic. Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. I take the kids every year to training camp. Yeah. Got a picture with Mike Tomlin with these little kiddos, and yeah. No, I mean, 8 hours sleep last night was sacrificed because of the late overtime game. But
yes.
Well, and it's funny, even Steelers. Here in Austin, there's a Steelers bar, and people, they congregate. So you get the sense of community in places, even being a Steelers fan. So
which also is a great thing to tie into the book. It's kind of a thing like, we may find places where your tribe is other places also where you move. So don't be afraid to leave thinking that certain things you like, those fans could be, because Steelers are a national team, and they're 6 rings, people, 6 rings. Yes. I'm gonna say they're a national, like the Patriots, the Cowboys, the Raiders, like they're national, they're teams that are nationally recognized by a lot of people. So you never know where you go. If you're a sports fan, you may find your tribe there too. I just saw in Pittsburgh, this is a great example then with your book and everything. In Pittsburgh, the reason why Pittsburgh is growing. It's starting to grow. A lot of tech companies are going there, doing a lot of filming. And one of the reasons why I left was that I bought a house there 20 years ago that appreciated so well. And I was like, it's time for me to go back to LA and just be here fully in Inglewood. I mean, in Inglewood, Hollywood, do that. And I did really well with that. But also those hills.
Totally. I mean, you go as an example. So Pittsburgh, I mentioned this in the book, you've got Pittsburgh, the city, sounds like where you were living, like it's thriving right now. Yeah. If you drive 2 or 3 hours out, it's not necessarily the same situation. And you see places where in some cases people they're stuck in place because the economics of the region changed. They weren't able to sell their home. Their home is one of their biggest assets. It's a really tough spot. So everyone has to play, at least in small measure, like a macroeconomic economist, to say, where's my region headed? Because if you wait too late sometimes for a spot, you may not have other options. And in some cases, that's okay because you've made a real commitment to place. But in other cases, if that's not your situation, then you may have limited your options down the road. But you look at the topography, back to your point of Pittsburgh, it's beautiful, but it also can be a bit treacherous. And so you have to ask yourself, where that's another factor in this. Where is it, easier and safe in some cases to have your physical dwelling?
Well, I do it all the time. It depends on how close the grocery stores are to you, a hospital or clinic. Can you get there easily? Do they have car share services or services that are actually good in that area? Because as you get older, health is a major concern. That's a major thing. And I say it's not for me. Health is a concern your whole life, obviously. But I'm part of what they call the sandwich generation. I have elderly parents. I have grown children and grandchildren. So I'm in the middle. So I'm looking out for myself, looking out for them, looking out for them. So I need to be somewhere where we all can actually easily exist and get to places easier. And so I lived when Pittsburgh, I lived in Troy Hill, which is I had the Heinz thing across the way, and it was wonderful. But it was secluded in some ways, even in Pittsburgh proper. I had to go down the hill to get to things, to the Giant Eagle or whatever, all these things, or Bob Evans. I had to do all that. But I could tell if you get older and it's wintertime. I'm like that. I mean, where there was times when we were stuck on the hill till they could come up and actually salt the road. I know folks in California don't know what that is, but in other countries, you know what I'm talking about. Ryan knows what I'm talking about. But other people in the country know what I'm talking about. But there's certain climate conditions too. I call them acts of God, climate conditions that I'm sure you have to get play. That comes into play too. Like we have a lot of snowbirds that go to Florida and stuff. From the
it does, and so you have on the surface the factor, like you described, like the how inclement can the weather be, and you put inclement weather coupled with like certain topographies like you described, it can be isolating. It can be risky. There's a number of ramifications for it. On the other hand, you're seeing more and more, of course, just headlines around climate change, and so that's another factor. So what if you move to Florida, but then you pick a spot that then has increased hurricane risk, or you're on the coast and there's risks of rising seas. So there's always something, but I think it's part of just evaluating what the risks are and what you value and your family values. But no doubt, I mean, I think one of the things that I think the pandemic's put a spotlight on is just the risk of isolation and loneliness. And so if you're in a spot where you're already at risk, or you don't feel like you're as connected as you need to be, and then you think about certain times of the season where that gets worse, it's a factor to think about. Absolutely. I've both. So my family, my mom and my maternal and paternal grandparents, are on the East Coast, and my maternal grandparents, they were in upper state New York, and they did the snowbird thing up until a point where they reached a point where they didn't want to, drive all the time. So they actually then just decided to kind of double down in upper state New York, but in a flat area, and they, had a place that worked for them. So.
Yeah, I have family in West Seneca, Buffalo, so I used to go up there all the time.
Yeah,
I know up there. I've been to the American side of the Niagara Falls. I've been to Canada. I've been to the Canadian side of it. Yeah. They decided to stay there. It was just kind of insular. It's fine. Everybody was there, but I have relatives in Florida, and they love it. I mean, it's just kind of one of those. I want to ask you about Austin, because for you guys, just in relation to this book and stuff, you did the assessment, and your wife and I talked about it. Yeah. So far, why is Austin the choice for you guys?
Well, I think, in our situation, going back to what you said, that there's that first step of that kind of personal assessment, current assessment of where you are. And then that opens up, where should you go? And I think for us, with my work at SmartLiving 360, a lot of the consulting I do and some of the development I work on, I found more and more that I was working with groups across the country. And so being in the middle of the country, both from a time zone perspective and then a flying perspective, was really important. We also felt that we've got, family in California that we wanted to be closer to. So if we want to be in the middle, wanted to be enough where there were direct flights for different reasons. But the city itself, Austin, it's an interesting spot. It's gotten a lot, it's been growing for a while. It accelerated with the pandemic. It's For my wife, warmer weather was helpful, so that was a factor, and we got that. I mean, I can, going back to my San Francisco days, I can sweat in overcast 60-degree weather. So you give me 100-degree humid weather, so it's yeah, it's an adventure. But it is it's really talented. It's entrepreneurial. It's a lot of just optimism that's here. It has actually one of the fastest growing demographics of people 65 plus. It's really intergenerational here. And while housing's gotten more expensive with people moving here, there's a lot of space for Austin and Central Texas to grow. And so I think that we're drawn to it for, a number of reasons, but, 2 years in, we feel really blessed. And we found a neighborhood where it's a great school district. But we're close enough to downtown that I can bicycle there to my office and so on. So we love it, we love it. But however, we had a strong social network in Baltimore. And so we're in the midst of developing that here. And that's an issue for anyone. I mean,
Sure.
If you're going from a place where it's strong, this doesn't happen seamlessly, and there has to be an intentionality to find your people, find those relationships that are so valuable, whether you're introverted or extroverted. That social fabric is key. And I talk about that a bit in the book.
You do, yeah, you do. No, it's funny you mentioned the whole middle of the country thing. It's so funny because I almost lived in Missouri. So literally Missouri, Colorado. I mean, they literally are the middle of the country. Yeah. And you're right. It makes it, 3 hours this way, 3 hours that way, 2 hours this way. It literally is like that. I really thought that when you said that. I like that's very true. It's like if you have things going on both sides, let's go down the middle. That's why I play. Yeah. It's okay. I kind of like that. But Texas is huge. I've driven through Texas, and it's like it goes on for.
Oh my gosh, it goes on forever. Yeah, one of the pretty things about Austin is it's part of that the hill country area too. Yeah. So from a topography area, it's fun to. It's pretty. It's green. I like to bicycle and all that stuff's there. So it's fun from an outdoor.
I was always calling it the Oregon of the South.
Yeah, it's got some parallels.
Yeah, I got some things there. I love that. Yeah. So why this book? What made you decide to write this kind of book?
So James, I was never down this, like having a book was never part of my bucket list. I remember I took the PSAT. I have a junior. She just took it a week ago. And I did fine on the math, but the English suggested I was English as a second language. So this was so I studied engineering in college. I'm like, I'm going to avoid any reading and writing. I mean, that was the whole plan. And then, and then stuff happens, So last 15 years, I went to business school. Since then, I've been focused on basically innovation and aging. How can we help people live longer, better lives, and principally through place? How can we be better places to go do that? And so I've lived in senior living communities. I've developed different age-friendly communities. I've worked for some of the largest national providers in the country, been on the investment side. So I've seen this from all sorts of different angles, James. And what happened was increasingly my friends were asking me, hey, Ryan, what do I do? And so I realized this was a bigger issue for people. And then we developed a community in the DC area where it was called the Stories at Congressional Plaza. It's a normal apartment building, but it's really designed for people of all ages. So how could we have the bathrooms designed in such a way that they're attractive, but actually would work well if you were in your 70s and 80s as well, with slip-resistant tiles and blocking behind the walls for grab bars, things like that. And how could we build this a real community where you knew your neighbor? And we built this leasing office to talk about the statistics around aging and why longevity is only about 30% linked to genetics. It's really about lifestyle and environment. And we found, and I shouldn't have been as surprised, but I was, that a lot of people hadn't been thinking about it quite as much as I had. And so I realized that if there was a book to help people process this, and actually on the SmartLiving 360 website, there's going to be more consumer tools as well that people can access there, that I realized that more people needed just an education on, not necessarily an education to say, here's some things to think about, here's some ways to process it, and hey, this is important, not here's what you must do. Hopefully, the way the book's outlined, it's really just like life. Choose your own adventure.
It is.
But
It is. It is.
yeah, but understand here are the things that you should care about. Here are your options. And so it happened organically. It was never part of a master plan at all, but it happened. And then the pandemic. I mean, I fortunately hadn't written a ton of the book before the pandemic, but I've written some of it. And as awful as the pandemic has been in so many different ways, the silver lining is I think it's made a lot more people realize, like you described earlier, that place matters. And are you in the right place? So in that respect, I think it makes this book and the conversation very timely.
I completely agree with that. Right place, right time, the ultimate guide to choosing a home for a second half of life. Johns Hopkins University Press. It's out. Ryan, Frederick, where can they get the book? Where can they get it?
So you can get the book, pretty much any place where there's books. Amazon seems to be a popular spot. Came out a little less than a week ago, and that's a good place. And then it's been great to see the response and even some of the early reviews, how it's impacting people. And then you also can find out more about it and get a free copy of the introduction at SmartLiving 360, and that's smartliving360.com. People can go there as well. Yeah.
I'll put that in the description. Yes, go ahead and do that. Thank you, Ryan, for your time. It's a great book. This is really great. It's a really great book. So thanks for doing this. You're helping the community. I love it.
I'm doing my part, James. I'm doing my part. Absolutely. As you are.
We're trying. We're all neighbors, right? We're all neighbors, right? That's how I look at it. And I'm James Lott Jr. You can follow me. We're all James Lott Jr.'s are sold at James Lott Jr. on all social media platforms. And a lot of help is on Facebook. You can go to our page there and hear more. And I'll post the book on there also. You can see more about that there and follow us. And also, this is also available as an audio podcast on every single streaming service you can think of, from iHeartRadio to Spotify to Google and Apple. I have some great people I talk to on the show. And of course, it's on the YouTube channel, my online network, JLJ Media. You can't forget it is JLJ Media, like James Lott Jr. Go ahead and subscribe. There's a little button down here somewhere. I point the wrong direction every time. I feel like one of those old folks, like, where is that newfangled thing? It's down here somewhere. Hit that subscribe button. Be kind, rewind, and watch programs like this. And share this with anybody you think needs to know about this. If you have any people who are aging or thinking about moving and thinking about send them this link to it so they can actually find out more about the book. This is something I'm going to share with a couple people myself too, actually. I think they should know about it because I think you got to make some decisions. Like I said, this is nothing set in stone. This could be a decision for the next 5 years for you. You have the book again next, there's something for ongoing, this is the good time of life now for many of us. This is the good part. So we want to live well while we're having the good parts, right? Everyone, take care of yourselves and each other.